Hi everyone, it's Cassandra Donnelly from Creative Passages, and today I want to share my process with you of creating these very grungy papers that have been momigami. They are made from collage papers, a lot of which is my own artwork. Some of it is papers that I found from way back when in my past. Some of it is scrapbooking papers, and I put a lot of marks on it, and I also sanded it and basically deconstructed it and reconstructed it, and ended up being a way for me to work through my trauma and express my feelings related to that, and also loss. But also I made it for my trauma journal to create pages, pockets, bookmarks, journal tags, etc. So stick around and let me share with you this process and explain it to you. It's meant to look very distressed. It was very satisfying to create these papers. I made 2 of them. Stick around and take a look.
Alright, I'm in the art studio and I have a big pile of paper scraps that I need to try to sort through. So my idea, and I think I got this idea from Amy Bishop, is to start piecing them together, but not on top of another piece of paper, just gluing the edges together. And it was a long time ago that I saw her do this, and she may have done it slightly differently, but and this is the first time I've tried it exactly like this. So I haven't been worrying about what pieces I'm attaching where a whole lot, hardly at all. There's mostly thin papers, but there's some thick watercolor papers. My plan is, and this will be an experimentation, is I want to distress it and maybe take the jelly plate to it. I don't want to like cover up everything or make it all look the same. I really don't. That'll be a challenge for me, because I like the variety, but yet I want to like integrate it just a little bit, distress it, maybe do the jelly plate, and maybe grunge it up a little bit with some maybe some paste, like crackle paste, or maybe just some plaster of Paris. And some of her techniques, she used plaster of Paris and she mixed it with acrylic medium. So I'll show you a little bit of this process. As you can see, I've got quite a lot to do, and also I've got other bins of just papers everywhere. So I want to like consolidate, organize, maybe make little stacks of neat little papers that I can use then for collage.
So now what I want to do is glue the pieces of paper together, and I'm just using scrap pieces, and I'm using a substrate. I'm using cellulose glue, which is a really nice glue. It will, I'll be able to glue it on the top and the bottom without having to worry about painting over it later. It will still accept paint, unlike other glues. And also the other thing nice about it is that if one of my collage pieces had oil pastels or Mod Podge on it, it will keep those pieces from sticking, like if I was to use this paper in my journal, which is why I'm making it for my trauma journal. It's kind of fun. I've used like old coffee dyed writing, like right here I wrote out some Bible verses, and I also just did some random spirit-filled writing, some old book pages I decorated. This was left over from another project. Some just I don't even know what this was. It could have been cleanup paper. Some book pages. Well, this was actually hymnal. This was a printable. Printables will work out really good for this.
This was from another project, my The Lord is There. This is another part of that random writing. And then I've got a lot of the papers that I made in the past or used for other projects. This was actually from one of my presentations, and maybe the Bible verses didn't print out right, or I'm not sure why it's that color, because I don't remember ever printing that. I don't know if it changed colors over time. This was just, I think it absorbed another piece of paper, but this was some really old papers that I found in one of my boxes. It looks like it was from maybe when I was looking for a daycare for my daughter. So, a long time ago. So anyway, I decided that I'll save like my tissue paper for the top of it, because obviously I don't want it by itself, because it will be way too thin, and it'll be interesting if I go to sand it, what will happen. So I kind of want to try sanding. I kind of want to try sanding this. I don't know how that's gonna go over. This was just, probably a print that didn't work out so well, and then I was probably trying to paint something else. But these kind of papers are actually fun to use for this. And I guess I don't want it to be too big, so I'm gonna have to do this. And I think I need to let it dry pretty well. I'm trying to get sort of a rectangle here. I just kind of like the randomness and the mystery of it. Ooh, look at this beautiful butterfly. How about we put beautiful butterfly on something? Let's put it like right here. See, I already got some. That's good. Well, that's neat how it did that. Okay, and this wrapping paper I think will work good for this. I'm gonna put that one right here. Oops. He's sort of cool, the Momigami. I think that's pushing a little bit, because these papers could easily come apart unless I did some kind of like thin tissue paper, like I've got so many ideas. Thin tissue paper over the whole thing. I could even put little twine or string or something in between that and the tissue paper. I think my ideas are getting a little outlandish, but that's how we create cool things. So, oopsie. They may or may not work. They may look stupid, but they may be interesting. And let's just do it that way. That was another printable of my art. One of my art pieces. Let's use some of these things again, and let's put it. I kind of don't like the straight lines a whole lot. Let's put it like that.
All right, so I am going to fast forward this while you watch me work. So I'm just gluing pieces of paper down. This is a watercolor paper scrap that was left over after I cut something out. And so I'm gluing it down. I'm making sure to glue it really well, because I don't want these pieces of paper popping out. So I will glue, under it and over it, and make sure, especially where it's um, connecting, that the glue is covering all the portions of where the paper meets one another. And then also I'm putting glue, extra glue all around it on top and underneath. Um, Later I go back and I do glue the back side of this as well because I want things really um, stuck on there and adhered very well. So I'm using scrapbooking paper, and that piece right there was my watercolor paper. That's a piece of wrapping paper, also that little one with the shiny blue on it. And that's what I think makes this so special and fun is the type of papers that you use. You can use papers with a lot of personal meaning to you, and maybe papers that relate to your history. That there, to the right with the black, was an underpaper that was even before an underpaper. It was just a failed stencil job. And then the paper to the right, the pink paper there, was another scrap I made with um, watercolors, I think, and some inks and stamps. And then the pink to the left was some artwork of mine. And then the blue and the greenish blue and the peach there was some scrapbooking paper. The peach might have been art paper. I can't tell looking at it now. And then coffee dyed paper that you see underneath is the beige looking one. So the point is that if you use your own artwork or you use papers with meaning to you, then this will become a very special piece of paper. The one with the flowers there is from a print I made. Actually, it was just artwork. It was like a watercolor painting, and then drew some flowers on there, and then I photocopied it, or scanned it rather, and then printed it out. And now I can use it in a bunch of different ways. So I think I printed it on origami paper. And then that purple there is watercolor paper with some gold specks on it. I mean, a watercolor painting I made. Then that's more artwork right there. And an old newspaper and some tissue paper. The tissue paper is a good way to put on something that's really light and see-through, so everything will adhere well together. And then this is just an old book page, I think, or else old something I printed out. Can't actually see that well from my computer as I'm narrating this. And I got my little grandson with me and my granddaughter as I'm narrating this. And so that is just another piece of art paper that I made that was like a filled, I don't know. I don't know what it was, but it was something I made. And I kind of like how scrappy these these papers are. Yeah. Um, that was just a piece of newspaper. And the variety makes it interesting too. And one thing I kind of experimented with is the fact that these papers all have different thicknesses. And so some are thick, some are thin. I was wondering about how that would work out, but it really just worked out just fine. Another piece of screen scrapbooking paper that I used there to the left, and then coffee dyed paper. And another piece of art paper that I made. And this one is developing. So I've been trying to keep these papers sort of like in a rectangular shape because I thought that would work out nice for whatever I might use it for, which again might be, well, it'll be for my trauma journal, but I could use it as a page itself. I could make a journal card out of it, or a journal tag out of it, or a pocket out of it. So now what I'm doing is gluing the back side of this to make sure that everything is stuck all together and nothing's going to be popping out. I do end up momigaming this, so it's really important that it all sticks together very, very well. And so by adding extra pieces to the back of the paper, especially across different sections or different pieces of paper that have been glued together. It can help strengthen the overall paper and help things stick a little bit better. So I did that occasionally if I kind of wondered if it seemed like it might be kind of weak in that area, I would put some paper, just another piece of scrap paper over the middle of two sections to adhere it. So these two are done. I have my base layer of papers all glued together, and it's drying and ready for the next step, which will be some mark making. Alright, so now that my paper is dry, I want to add some marks. I'm going to use some black acrylic paint from Amsterdam. It might actually be a Payne's Gray. And I'm putting it through a stencil. I tried a palette knife, didn't do that well, but I grabbed a sponge then and decided that worked much better. So one thing I'm trying to do is integrate the papers by adding these marks. So I'm purposely going over two sections at once and putting the marks sort of in between those two sections to make them look more cohesive. And I have this stencil kind of like, it's like a honeycomb, and I'm thinking about bees and just, honey and overflow from the Lord and just some prophetic meaning about that. But I also like the smaller circles as well. And it seems that these dark marks here, I believe that is a Payne's Gray, looks really nice. So now I'm just taking the palette knife and adding some random spots of paint because I watched a few videos and I can't even remember where on the sanding and deconstruction process, and it seemed like they had thick coats of acrylic paint on there before they sanded it. Now that one I just scratched through, which might be sanded off, I don't know, but I love scratching through wet paint and I love Scrofito effect. So this particular piece also has a lot of pink on it, as you see with some of those papers. So that's why I decided to add some pink acrylic paint, and that was just a cheap brand. I can't remember what it was. Probably got it at Walmart. So I'm not particular about what types of paint I use. And now I'm actually drawing on some blue marks because there was some similar marks on one of the pieces of the papers, and so I want to expand that elsewhere and make it look like it was meant to be there. Who knows why those marks got there to begin with in that one random piece of paper, but I decided it needs some similar marks across. So now I'm actually using Distress Oxide spray. This is a pink color. It's probably the Abandoned Coral, I think. And I'm going to then use that just to kind of spread the paint a little bit. And so I want to add some yellow. This is a cheap craft paint from Walmart, and I had a little bit of trouble with it coming out too much, so I just kind of slathered it on there. And I'm spreading it out with the palette knife now. Decided it needs a little bit of bright yellow. And now I'm going back to some blue, and I'm just trying to sort of match some of the colors that are already on there. I'm not sure if the yellow was on there or not, or if I just decided I needed some yellow. So this part is just kind of fun because, you just give yourself permission to be messy and loose and free. Not I'm just randomly drawing black lines on there again, similar to those blue lines I had on there before. Right now I'm fast forwarding again as you watch me sand the paper down. Again, this was the first time I've ever sanded, and it was a lot of fun. I didn't really know what I was doing, but that's how you learn. I was just experimenting. I did sand it a little bit too much in certain parts, and I created holes. Didn't really bother me because this is for my trauma journal, and the holes just kind of represent my trauma and the ways that I got damaged. So it kind of it accented the whole purpose of the paper. and I enjoyed doing it. It did give it a really worn look. And there's different types of sandpaper you could get. This one was actually pretty gritty and not fine. Um, Perhaps like a finer one would not have worn a hole in my paper. But this seemed adequate, and this is all the sandpaper that I had on hand. So if you're going to try this, then do keep that in mind. The type of sandpaper you use could have drastically different effects. This really rough sandpaper does take quite a bit of the paper off and the paint off, which, I was trying to take some of that paint off for a worn look. All right, so I'm just sanding different parts of this till I feel satisfied. I want it to look very distressed and worn and antique. I do have to be careful that I'm not going to completely remove the paper. I can always go back and glue it again if that does happen. Alright, so now that I have it worn with the sandpaper, I want to distress it, and this is Vintage Photo that I'm using. And I want to make it look even more distressed and sort of antique and rugged looking, and that is why I'm just adding the Vintage Photo. I'm pretty sure it's Vintage Photo. I tried to zoom in. Could have been espresso, or it could have been walnut stain, but I'm pretty almost positive it's Vintage Photo. And it would be up to you what type of look or stain you want to use. This is actually Stress Oxide ink. So I did that. Now I'm actually going to go over it with some gold paint, and this is a liquid watercolor because I love gold, and in my opinion, gold just dresses everything up and makes it beautiful. So now I'm on to my next one. I'm going to sand it and do the same process I did with the other one. But instead of the gold, I'm going to use like a pink glaze. Okay, so I'm getting more sandpaper because I had really, really demolished that first piece of sandpaper and it wasn't working so well. So now I have another piece of coarse sandpaper, and I'm just rubbing hard on it in various places to make it look worn, because I think that, as I said before, is a good metaphor for how worn I feel sometimes because of my trauma and also just because of aging, and just battered, because of the things of life that happen. But yet, I still wanted this paper to look aged and worn, but still be beautiful and still have a purpose. So the purpose is going to be that it really fits well into my trauma journal and makes interesting, pages and pockets and journal cards and things like that. And I love, love, love having these various different, so personal papers that I can use in my journals, especially my trauma journal. It just makes it that much more special. And so at the sound of this recording, this narration, I already have used one of these papers in my trauma journal. That will be the next video. So now that I've sanded it, I'm going to also add that Vintage Photo to it and just rubbing it on various places to make it look kind of old and worn. And then I will add a pink glaze to it, which you will see in a bit. So I'm just rubbing this on here. And especially where it's like extra rubbed from the sandpaper, I'm putting some of that Distress Oxide on it. Ink is the word. Okay, so now I'm done with the Distress Oxide ink, and I want to add my glaze, and I'm using a gloss glazing liquid by Golden. So I'm not very precise. I've never been a precise person. I'm just going to use this old little cup, pour some in there, and then put a drop of the pink and a drop of the gold and mix it up until I get a color that I like. So this is going to go on transparent. Of course, the less color you use of your paint, then the lighter the color will be, and the more paint you add, the darker it will be. So if I didn't like that color, I could go back, and I could make it darker, but I can't go back and make it lighter unless I add more of the glaze. So I was satisfied with this color though. So now I'm going to just take all the rest of that glaze and use it up on the paper. And then there's another piece of paper I use as well, but I just cut that part. No, I didn't cut that part out. Sorry. Well, so this is like that piece of paper with the yellow is what I used to clean up the yellow that spilled out. But later I can take those scraps and I can turn them into collage papers. I'll probably add more marks to it. So now I'm going to dry it, and I'm going to add more methyl cellulose glue, which I will put the link to this the bottom. So what I do is I just pour water in a container, and then I just sprinkle a few sprinkles. I don't measure anything. I just put a few sprinkles in there, and then I mix it up with my brush. It's going to be lumpy. If you don't want it to be lumpy, you can wait till the next day and then use it, but I don't mind the lumps. And so it's better to have it too thick than too thin. If it's really, really thick, it'll be more like a paste you can just rub on with your hands. Otherwise, I use a brush. For this, for your papers, you do want it a little bit too, well, if you had to err, it'd be better for it to be too thick than too thin. And sometimes I'll just spread it on like a paste. In this case, I had it liquidy. So it might take a little getting used to before you figure out the right amount. When I first started using the cellulose glue, I added the powder first and then the water, and then that's going to be way, way too thick. You only need a few sprinkles, so it's best just to pour water in a container and just grab a little bit with your fingers, and then just sprinkle it in there, and then mix it up, see what it's like, and then mix it up again and kind of take a look at it, and it will get thick, like really quickly. It'll start getting thicker. So give it a few minutes before you add any more of the cellulose powder to it. Okay, so we're done. I've glued the front and the back, and now I'm letting it dry again. It's been distressed with the color.
Alright, I want to talk about these papers right here. Momigami them. I almost didn't. Wasn't sure if I had wanted to momigami them. But I just decided to go ahead and do that. Not necessarily because I thought I would like to look better, but for the process of it and the experience of it, which I think that's really what these papers are all about. It's a way to express my trauma and the things I've lost in life. In particular, like the fact that I'm, getting older. I'm now middle-aged. I'm getting ready to turn 55. And there's things that, I can't get back. This process of the papers, that I was so interested in, like, deconstruction and reconstruction, that theme of, it's kind of like a metaphor for life. Like, in life, there's so many things, adversities that come your way that I feel like they deconstruct you, or they wear on you, they tear on you, they're hard on you. And I think I wanted to simulate that, capture that through the art process, And what I particularly loved about these papers right here is that there's like history in them. Like this one, this writing right here has got to be from the 90s. And I found it. And then there's this here says, weeping may endure for the night, but joy comes in the morning. And then there's another scripture over here. This is like when I made random papers with like scriptures on them. I mean, there's only part of it there, but something about me, word is I stand and on the promises. The promises are coming. And this actually was more so like, you know, just random prophetic words, I think. And there's music in here, and then there's the butterfly. The butterfly is coming out of, you know, all the catastrophe, which represents me. Like, no matter what kind of adversity I go through, I come out of it. And then right here, this was from The Lord is There, from Ezekiel 48, but also it represents Ezekiel 47 too in my mind, because, you know, in Ezekiel 47 it talks about the river of life. You know, in the future, that's going to make dead things come to life again. So it's almost like, it's also a spiritual metaphor, like you die to yourself, and maybe to the things you wanted, even sometimes. The way things you thought, the way things should have been in your mind. And it's like you have to accept these things that are gone, that didn't quite work out the way that you wanted, the things that hurt you and weathered you and were rough on you and maybe even tattered you a bit. But you come out of it and you become beautiful again. And then I momigamied this, right, which was not an easy process. It took me about 2 hours, maybe 3 hours to momigami this, and I did use Konyaku starch. I didn't want you to have to watch me do that, because it was very painstaking, very tedious. It took a lot of time. I'm thinking, I don't think anybody else is going to want to duplicate this process, but for me, it was more the therapeutic value of doing it, and just what it represents to me. But the momigami process, God began to speak to me in it, because you had to start off, you couldn't just immediately start folding it up like this, okay? Because there were so many like tears, right? So many wounds, which ended up getting patched up with different pieces of paper or different tape. You can see all these spots, and I tried to like adhere it really well with the glue and things like that. I mean, this had so much glue on it, like when I was making it, and then afterwards, front and back, you guys saw me put the cellulose glue on there. Also, so when I momigamied it, it wouldn't stick together. And what I found is the parts that had the extra layers of paper, they were real tough, and I had to go about the folding process very, very slowly, softening it up, and not pushing too hard, because if I pushed it too hard when it wasn't pliable enough yet, it would rip. And maybe, you know, some parts were ripped when I did the sandpaper, and there was a few extra rips maybe when I momigamied it, but I try to be real careful. And you could see like parts, you know, coming undone right here that were previously glued. Another part, I don't know why, but when I used a Konyaku starch, it actually, when it wasn't dry yet, it started to stick. I'm not sure why, because I mixed it for 30 minutes. I let it sit overnight. But God began to speak to me like, where when he's shaping us, he needs to make us soft and pliable. And sometimes we can become hard and brittle, just like this paper. And he can't just soften, he can't just like crunch us too quickly, you know, like in his hands, because we'll break apart. Like, he takes gentle care with us. Like, there might be some breaking, but it's not too much breaking. You know what I mean? Just only a little bit. Sometimes he allows the discipline. Like, sometimes we get out of his grace, or, you know, we end up sinning and putting ourselves under the submission of Satan, who has jurisdiction. Then he has legal rights to harm us. And God may allow some of the natural consequences of our choices. But yet, like, if we follow him, he, like, is keeping a close eye, and he's there to rescue us and keep us from being harmed too much. And he's using those circumstances, even the discipline, to shape us and make us soft and pliable and flexible. And then, even though it's weathered and worn and it looks different than it did before, it turns into its own kind of beauty. And that's also how I feel about aging. Like, I get weathered and, you know, more worn looking. But it's almost like coming to terms with that, accepting that there's a new beauty that emerges. If you're willing to accept it and see it as that, a new beauty, you know, with all the crinkles and all the folds. And but as I'm jumping from topic to topic and metaphor to metaphor, but as I was momigamiing this, God was just showing me, like, how slowly he had to go to make me tender and flexible. And, you know, like, I had to fold this different ways and back and forth over and over and over again, like, and make different creases each and every time. And especially, like, where it was hard and brittle because of extra paper, I had to, you know, maybe fold it like this a little bit, work on that area and unfold it. And I mean, I had to do it so slowly that it took me about 2 to 3 hours to do both of these. So that is what God showed me, and I wanted to share that. This is going to go in my trauma journal somehow. Maybe it'll be a page of its own, like that. You know, maybe it'll be a pocket. I mean, I like it, and I like the weather look. And I'm thinking about also maybe going in with more distress ink on these edges. There's something about that I'm drawn to. Like, I'm drawn to the worn look, and even the holes. And you saw me, like, with the Jumchi, there was a big hole there, and some of my other papers. But I'm embracing that because it represents, you know, the holes of life. And despite that, like, it's still intact. You know what I mean? Like, I'm still intact despite the abuse and the trauma and the adversity and everything I've gone through. I'm still intact. And these holes can be repaired too. But also these holes, like, if you're looking at it like if you're full of holes, it's where the glory can come and pour through as well. Like, God doesn't need us to be perfect vessels. He just needs us to be submitted to him. Just to be submitted to him. And sometimes it's in our weakness. Like, when we're weak, we can depend on him and rely on him. And when we're humble, he can do more with us than if we're just think we have it all together and we're proud. And yeah, so this is like, God sees something beautiful. Like, I see something beautiful. It's like coming to terms with the reality of life and seeing it as beautiful, even if it wasn't like what you thought, or even if you did get beat up a little bit. I guess that's all I wanted to say. I mean, I can't wait to use it. And as I was momigami, you know, this part came loose from underneath, but I think it's so cool. I don't even know what this one says or where the writing came from. And it was like this. It says something on the back here called, I don't even know, called, I don't know. Who knows what it was? It could have been another Bible verse. This to me is like a little, like a little secret window right here. I don't know if I'll glue that back down. Like, I have to go through maybe the repair stage, but I want to, yeah, add some distress ink to all this stuff. But I wanted to share my thoughts before I forget them. The way God spoke to me about this. My favorite is this one, because of course I love pink, and also this has the scriptures and some of the older paper. I think I was trying to plan my life, you know, back when my daughter was first born. Yeah, and so that one is a little bit more meaningful to me, but I do like the gold in this one, and I like the black streaks in here as well. And it does have pops of pink and turquoise and all of that. There's one more thought that I had that I forgot to mention. When God is like molding us and folding us and shaping us, and we're hard and crunching, has to go really slow. It could relate to discipline too. Like when He disciplines us, there's things that, you know, when we, well, let me back up and say, when we do something that is not within His will, like when it's not what He wanted for us, let's say it's a sin, we fall away from God, and then we subject ourselves to Satan and his jurisdiction. Like, he's of the world, he's the god of the world, and when we fall into sin, then we remove ourselves from the protection of the Lord, and then we go into outside of that, where Satan has legal rights to harm us. Okay, but despite that, like, if we have a relationship with God, we might be out there and Satan might have legal rights to harm us, but like, God is still sovereign. He's still watching over everything, and he'll set parameters on that, just like He did with Job in the Bible. Like, him and Satan had a discussion, and Satan was only allowed to do so much, and he couldn't like do more than God allowed. And so it was kind of like, as I was folding this, and God was showing me how it needed to be done carefully, just a little bit of like folding at a time before the whole thing was folded, and almost like when He disciplines, just maybe allowing a little bit to shape us, you know, as we go along. I suppose if we did something really catastrophic, we could lose our whole life, you know. We always have free choice. He doesn't take away our choices, but yet He's like watches over the whole process, and He's trying to help us make the right choices, and He's trying to be gentle with us. Like with me, like I'll just tell you, like, it was such a slow, gradual process for me to give up sin. And you know, like, I was sexually promiscuous in the beginning, you know, and it didn't just like disappear overnight. Like, I told God, Lord, I want to help, but I don't, like, I want to not stop, you know what I mean? Like, I was divided, but like, Lord, change my heart, like, make me change it so I'm not like, I'm not in this sin. And God did. Like, He changed my heart. He changed my thoughts. He did it little by little. And I don't have time to go in the whole testimony, but little by little by little by little, not only did He change my behaviors, but He changed my thoughts. You know, He made me pure. And but during the process, then I did get battered in life. Satan did have permission to harm me, and I did, was a single mom and had a baby out of wedlock, and I lived in poverty for a long time. And I suffered the consequences, but God never stopped loving me or looking out for me or calling out to me. And I built my relationship to Him, and it just got better and better. And I learned that He loves me, and I went from a fear-based relationship to a love-based relationship. And He did that. He just bent me, molded me little by little by little by little. And life's been hard. I'm finally coming to a better spot, but there's always some kind of hardship. There's always some kind of stress that you have to get through. At least for me, it hasn't really eased up. It's just different types of stress. But as you go through things like that, you develop deep roots in the Lord. And if you turn to the God in your adversity and in your trials, it can produce endurance. It can produce a deeper faith. You put your roots down deep in the Lord, and then eventually you get to the point where you start trusting Him. I went through that before, but it was a little bit painful, but you were there, and you took care of me, and you provided for me, etc. Part of me sometimes fears because I don't want to go back to anything painful, but at the same time I know, you took care of me. You always provided for me. And so you learn to trust, okay, I see that you're going to be good. You're going to provide for me, and I don't have to worry, and you are, if you look back, for me, I can look back and see my life is on a trajectory of good. It's getting better and better and better and better and better. And so, God has a hold of it, and as I'm submitting, things are changing for the better. I guess that's all I wanted to add to this. Little by little. Bye.
Thank you for taking the time to stop by and watch this video. Hope it blessed you. Hope it inspired you. It was a little bit of work to make these papers, but it was so worthwhile. If you have any type of history of trauma, or you're working through loss, or just trying to work through acceptance of aging, I would recommend a process like this. Or maybe just for the fun of it, just to make a paper that uses a bunch of scraps with symbolic significance. That part in itself is amazing. So you could really take this in a lot of different directions, which could be very satisfying for your soul. Again, this is more about the process than the final product, although I am very satisfied with the final product. So if you want to give it a go, I would encourage you to do so, or maybe just try something like this in a modified form. Have a great day, everyone. Bye again, and make time for your art.